In a quiet section of Davao City in the southern Philippines lies Huna Subdivision, one of the more exclusive subdivisions in the city. Huna has long been considered a playground of the Ampatuan clan, one of the most influential clans in central Mindanao, whose patriarch, Andal Ampatuan Sr., now stands accused of the murder of 58 people in what is now known as the Maguindanao Massacre. Records from the Davao City Assessor's Office show that the Ampatuans have at least 15 properties in this community alone. These are far from your ordinary properties. One house along Kasuy Street stands out among the rest. This mansion belongs to Andal Ampatuan Sr. himself. It occupies one whole block, around 4,000 square meters. The perimeter wall itself is said to cost several million pesos already. The guard houses that stand over every corner are bigger than your average house.
Kagaya namin na po, sir, isang block, wala na yan. Isang bahay na yan.
Isang bahay lang?
Isang bahay yung isang block yata. 100,000.
There are solar panels on the roof, reportedly to heat the indoor swimming pool inside. But the mansion, for all its grandeur, was never finished. What you see is not even half of the property. This is the part left unfinished. The perimeter wall is unpainted, but it is clearly of the same design. Construction stalled in the wake of the 2009 Maguindanao Massacre, after Andal Ampatuan Sr. and his sons were jailed and charged with multiple murder. Now the property is padlocked, and the gates bear the graffiti of angry Mindanaoans. This property is only one of many properties owned by the family of Andal Ampatuan Sr. A Manila court has identified and frozen 161 properties listed in the family's name. In 2011, the Anti-Money Laundering Council, or the AMLAC, filed a civil forfeiture case against the Ampatuan clan. The AMLAC wants to seize the Ampatuan assets on the belief that the assets were illegally acquired using government funds. The courts handed down the freeze order to make sure that the assets are not dissipated while the case is pending before the courts. This means the properties may not be sold or transferred while the case grinds on. But investigation by the PCIJ and Minda News reveals that the freeze order may have come a little too late. 2 weeks before the freeze order was imposed, the land titles of 8 pieces of real property belonging to Andal Ampatuan Jr. were transferred to somebody else. Transfer Certificate of Title number 410739 covers 600 square meters. TCT 430740 and 741 also cover 600 square meters. TCT 445458, 459, and 460 cover 555 square meters. And TCT 444571 cover 600 square meters. All of these titles are for lands owned by Andal Jr. in Huna Subdivision. There is one more property in nearby Matina Crossing, covering 783 square meters under TCT 416373. Certified through copies of the land titles acquired by the PCIJ show that almost all the properties were transferred in just one day. May 13, 2011 for the 7 properties in Huna Subdivision, and May 19, 2011 for the one in Matina Crossing. It was more than 2 weeks after the titles were transferred when the AMLAC asked the Court of Appeals for a freeze order. The court handed down the freeze order on June 6, 2011. The order still included the 8 properties that Andal Jr. had sold off. By then, it was already too late. But there is one more issue that complicates the sale. The buyer of the 8 properties happens to be Andal Jr.'s own lawyer. The PCIJ and Minda News secured copies of the new titles of the 8 properties under the name of Arnel C. Manaloto from Santo Entierro Street in Angeles City. Manaloto is one of many lawyers of Andal Jr. in his other court cases in Manila and Maguindanao. He is reported to be a frequent visitor of Andal Jr. in his jail cell and has on several occasions attended the trial of the multiple murder case, even though he supposedly is not a member of the defense panel. Last year, Manaloto also figured prominently in a confrontation with Maguindanao Governor Esmael Mangudadatu. Mangudadatu had insisted on conducting a surprise inspection of the jail cell of Andal Jr., but was blocked by Manaloto. Law experts say that the sale may be problematic, given that the buyer is the lawyer of the accused and the properties were to have been the target of a government seizure.
The general principle there is the lawyer should not be materially or pecuniarily or in any way interested in property that is owned by the client, or where the client has an interest in, that is subject of the litigation. No? So in principle, hindi dapat bilhin, ibenta, maging broker, no?
Attorney Teddy Te of the University of the Philippines College of Law says the sale may give the appearance of an attempt by the client to hide his properties under the name of his lawyer, especially since the case involves forfeiture of the properties.
It could be a possible source of conflict of interest. It could also be the other way, a possible source of collusion, meaning possible source of fraud. No? Because madaling gawin kasi ng abogado ng kliyente kung alam na abogado na may dapat silang itago at sabihin ng kliyente, lipat ko na lang sa'yo para wala na sa akin, diba? At kung pumayag yung abogado, then that's problematic because they now share the same interest. There's no conflict of interest. They now share the same interest, and the interest is fraudulent, meaning that dapat papel na abogado is to say, uy, hindi ko pwedeng gawin yan kasi bawal sa amin. At pag ginawa mo yan, ang effect niyan hindi na pwedeng habulin yung property. But if the lawyer agrees and the property is transferred to him, and therefore now there's no conflict because they now have the same interest, which is to keep the property away, then yes, that could be a source of action and source of discipline as well.
Families of the victims of the Maguindanao massacre are also questioning the sale.
Aside from the Code of Professional Responsibility, which governs the conduct of the lawyers, I just cannot remember the exact provision under the Civil Code that actually says sales cannot take place between a lawyer and a client when it involves a piece of property that is being contested, let's say in a judicial proceeding. So there is a prohibition under the Civil Code, aside from the prohibition, the generic provision that's found under the Code of Professional Responsibility.
Attorney Prima Quinsayas is the legal counsel of the Freedom Fund for Filipino Journalists, a group that provides legal and financial support to families of journalists who have been murdered. Quinsayas says families of victims of the massacre have long worried that the Ampatuan assets were slowly being dissipated as the case drags on in court.
Early 2010, there were relatives saying that, attorney, nabalitaan namin parang yung sasakyan ni na Ampatuan parang binenta na sa ganito. And I'll tell them, do you have proof? Hindi, attorney, nababalitaan lang namin, attorney. So they have raised those concerns as early as 2010.
It is for this reason that the families have been asking the courts to move faster in both the civil and criminal cases against the Ampatuans.
And the last time it was raised was, I think, last year when some were saying, attorney, kung makonvict sila, attorney, would they still have properties? Kasi baka binibenta na o nililipat na sa pangalan ng iba. They have actually raised that concern with me. That's why I think a while ago when we were discussing their willingness to actually consider accepting the offer of compromise or settlement, that's one of the concerns they raised, na baka after 3, 4, 5 years, even if we do get a conviction and the judge awards damages, the decision cannot actually be executed because there is nothing, no property to be used to pay let's say the civil damages that were awarded by the court.
The PCIJ tried several times to get an interview with Attorney Manaloto. At first, we looked for him in the address listed in his new title, 46B Santo Entierro Street in Angeles City. But Attorney Manaloto had already transferred offices. We found his new office here, along Pandan Street, a few kilometers away. Manaloto's secretary, however, said the lawyer was not in, even as his clients waited for him in the foyer. After a while, the clients left, saying their appointments were cancelled because of our presence. The PCIJ sought an appointment with Manaloto through his secretary to no avail. We then asked Attorney Siegfried Fortun, lead counsel of the Ampatuans, what role Manaloto played in the Ampatuans' defense. In an email message, Fortun confirmed that Manaloto is Andal Jr.'s lawyer in some of his cases in Maguindanao. Manaloto also lawyers for Andal Jr.'s wife, Rechal. Fortun added that Manaloto is not part of the Ampatuan defense team in the murder trial. Fortun said that the last time he saw Manaloto was during Manaloto's wedding in Pampanga earlier this year. By all indications, Manaloto is a relatively young lawyer. In an online listing of lawyers, Manaloto is recorded to have become a member of the Philippine Bar only in 2005. He had a stint as the appointment secretary of former Pampanga Governor Ed Panlilio before becoming a lawyer for the Ampatuans. Attorney Tess says it would be interesting to see how the young Manaloto could buy 8 properties in Davao City after practicing law for only 7 years.
And the second thing that's also going to be problematic there is, of course, these are huge tracts of land. These are many parcels of property, and the question of how he was able to get enough income to buy those properties, nang sabay-sabay, because of course there will be a paper trail. There will be taxes that need to be paid. There will be documents that need to be filed, and these have to be the transfers have to be processed. So those become problematic.
In each of the memoranda of encumbrance that the PCIJ secured from the new land titles, Manaloto is recorded to have paid 20 million to Andal Jr. What is not clear is whether Manaloto paid 20 million for each of the 8 properties, or if he paid 20 million for all 8 in a package deal. If it was a package deal, the average price for each property would be a staggeringly low 2.5 million pesos each. We were able to find one of the properties sold by Andal Jr. to Manaloto. This property along 638 Kasoy Street in Davao City is just a block away from the grand mansion of his father Andal Sr. and his brother Zaldi. The property is huge and contains several large structures inside. The caretaker of the house confirmed that the property is now owned by Manaloto. Ay, ma'am, ito po yung 638? 638? Nandyan si Atty. Manaloto?
Wala po si dito.
Pero dito ang bahay niya?
Dito.
Okay. Although the lawyer seldom visits. The caretaker also confirmed that the property was acquired sometime last year. Gano'n pupunta naman siya dito?
Minsan-minsan po.
Saan pupunta siya rito? Okay. Kasi hinahanap kami, may lang kami mga hinahanap kasama sa amin yung bahay niyo. Kailan kaya siya babalik?
Hindi ko lang alam kung kailan kasi nag-surprise naman siya pumupunta dito, sir.
Surprise lang?
Opo.
Kailan po niya pag-ari? Kailan pa niya pag-ari?
Last year po.
Further investigation by the PCIJ showed that Manaloto is involved with 2 other companies, both of which were set up after the sale of the properties to the young lawyer. 8 Star Farms was formed in September 2011 with a paid-up capital of only 62,500 pesos. 8 Bullet Security Agency was formed only in August this year with only 500,000 pesos in the bank, according to the agency's treasurer, who is Manaloto himself. The PCIJ tried to get an interview with the AMLAC on how the Ampatuans were able to beat them to the draw. AMLAC officials refused to talk to us, saying their operations were confidential. But clearly the government was caught by surprise when the Ampatuans sold the properties. According to the Land Registration Authority, they were obliged to process the sale because the freeze order came too late.
Kasi yung intention naman hindi naman sa RD side but on the parties, on the owner, on the buyer, kung kumpleto naman yung papeles kahit ba public record na merong case involving the forfeiture, at the time the transaction was entered in the registry, wala naman siyang notice yung Register of Deeds na meron ng order freezing the property. It becomes the ministerial duty of the Register of Deeds to process the transaction.
In the end, the questions remain. How were the Ampatuans able to beat government to the punch? Are there more properties that have been sold off? And if government and the families are able to secure convictions, how much of the fabled Ampatuan properties would still be in their name?
If there's already a freeze order, I think that's judicial notice to all government agencies connected. So let's say if we're talking about accounts, banks should be informed that these certain accounts under the certain names have been frozen and no transaction whatsoever can be entertained. And in the case of property, I would be assuming the Registry of Deeds should know, not wait for someone to give them, remind them na, oops, under judicial scrutiny yan, and there's a freeze order from the court. That's something that I am assuming should be known to concerned government agencies.
So again, the question of ethics comes in, no? Kasi dapat he should have known better than to say, look, you know, hindi naman siya pinanganak siguro kahapon na, you know, this person is selling me 8 properties and sure, I'll buy them, right? Of course, he knows what those properties signify. He knows what those properties mean, you know, and if he didn't, then perhaps dapat nag-due diligence siya to find out, no? And again, if I were a buyer and I would be buying 8 or 6 to 8 tracts of land, huge parcels of property worth several millions of pesos from a person who is in jail, okay, for a massacre, medyo, di ba, at the very least, mag-iingat ka, no?
It's government that filed that case. I think AMLAC did. And what's the point of filing that case if they are not going to safeguard what they hope to safeguard, which is basically to keep the properties frozen or maintain status quo so that there is no movement, no attempts to alienate the property, mortgage the property, hide the property under somebody's name. Definitely, that's the job of the government if it's really serious about the case that AMLAC filed.